Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Guild podcast, a podcast that's all about the experiences and memories that playing board games with friends and family can create. As always, your hosts Dan, Nathan, Peter, and James. We're going to talk about deck building games. Alright, so basically we're going to start off with the definition of a deck building game according to BGG. So according to BGG, a deck building game is a game featuring a mechanic where players each play from their own deck cards, but through the course of the game, additional cards are selected for inclusion in the player's deck, which will be drawn and used in future reshuffles of the deck. Often these games require players to discard their hands each turn, forcing a higher rate of card turnover. The founding father, or what actually got the genre sparked, was the board game Dominion. Got everything started. Multiple sites all cite Dominion as the grandfather of the deck building mechanic.
There's an element of the mechanic that's very common that they didn't mention, is the idea of whether you call it the river or the market, but a shared line, essentially a line in the middle of cards that everybody can buy from that's replenishing every turn. It's not necessarily essential to be considered a deck builder, but it is I think it's a very core part of it because it's in almost all of the true deck builders.
All the deck builders have a mechanism by which you put cards into your deck. In Dominion, this is an array of cards. Like there's several piles of cards on the table, and you could take your pick. It may have started with Ascension, maybe not, but Ascension is one of the core examples where presented with some number of options from this deck of cards to pick from, and then it replenishes as cards are...
Yeah, I don't think... some of the deck builders, you don't even purchase the card. You can just acquire a card every round, so purchasing of the card's not required. But generally, you'll have a pool of cards that's available to you on your turn. You'll get to upgrade or select those cards, and then those cards will upgrade or do something with your deck, and you get to play. So in general, it's all about managing the deck that you're playing with by getting new cards or new things to mitigate or change those cards. Because I do think one of the examples Dan might have later on is a deck builder, even though you're not technically adding new cards to your deck. So I'm wondering if you included that one, but we'll see. If not, I'll include it. But yeah, so basically I want to start off with the granddaddy of them and what some of the other ones like Ascension tried to do to try to fix some of the issues with Dominion. So Dominion is actually a fairly old game at this point, comparatively.
2008.
Dominion was published in 2008. So in Dominion, you're going to have 10 cards, and you're going to draw 5, then you're going to play all 5 and draw 5 more. And what you're going to do in Dominion is you have an array of 10 available cards. These cards do not change in Dominion. These are the base 10 cards that you selected from a giant pool of available cards, and each of these ones have multiple copies. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the coins that are cards in your hands to purchase more cards to put in your discard pile, that once your draw pile runs out, you're going to shuffle them in, draw your cards, and play them. Outside of those 10 cards, there's different denominations of money you can purchase, the money cards you can put in to help you buy more cards, and the whole point of the game is there's victory point cards that you can purchase that do nothing in your deck. So the cool thing about Dominion is you have to balance purchasing powerful cards that give you combos and stuff versus getting more money to buy more cards versus getting the victory points that are actually how you win the game. That whole idea was super novel.
You touch on another element that is actually been adopted by a lot of other deck builders, the idea of that the first 2 turns, you're basically only going to have your starter cards. It's the third turn onwards where you have a chance of getting new cards that you've added in actually in your hand.
And arguably with Dominion, there's a couple other things. We can have a whole episode just on Dominion, but
True.
In essence, the first 2 turns of your play are fixed. Same thing happens with the majority of other deck builders. The first 2 turns are really fixed. You know what your 10 cards are. You either drew X or you're going to draw Y the next turn. So you know in Dominion if you drew 2 gold, you know, I don't remember what's in Dominion. I played it forever. Tons of games with my daughters, but I don't remember the exact gold count, but let's say there's 5. So you draw 2, you know your next hand you're going to draw 3. Those are the 2 cards you can purchase, so you know your array of cards you can get, and you keep going. The problem with Dominion is it's good that it became super popular, but they kept adding card sets to it. And unlike some of the other deck builders we're going to talk about, Dominion gives you the opportunity to select what you put in. Because it gives you the opportunity to select what you get to put in, you can put in cards that don't combo well, cards that don't function well. So the game can devolve into, these 3 cards are the only thing I ever want to purchase. The winner of the game in Dominion can be, if the cards aren't balanced right in your array of cards you get, The person who bought the cards first and got the combos first will win.
Going back just a second to your starting hand, I
Yeah.
think that Star Realms, Hero Realms perfectly exemplify what you're talking about. Because in both those games, your starting deck is, I think, 2 cards that generate combat, and like all the other cards in your starting deck generate coins/buy power. So guaranteed on your first turn of tunes to have one hand, like 2 hands that will add up to 8 coins. That could be 3 and 5, or that could be 4 and 4.
Right. And getting onto that, and there's multiple other games that we can talk about in there. So we talked about Star Realms. Hero Realms is the same game, just medieval in one's space. There's some nuancy difference, but in general, one of the things that both of them did was you still have that same five cards you talked about, and you still have your same buying power. But it created that market array where you randomly set out cards, because that was one of the biggest complaints about, I believe, about Dominion, was that you have those 10 stagnant cards, and depending on who set it up, you could basically get a runaway winner, but having a market array can mitigate that. It also has its own problems, but I think you've played Dominion a bunch, haven't you, Dan? I know Nathan has.
Oh, no. I've only played Dominion a couple times, and it was after I played a lot of other deck builders.
Okay. So what do you think? So we're not getting into Ascension yet, because I have a lot of stuff for it. You played Hero Realms and Star Realms. What do you think of that market array versus the 10 card thing?
Okay, so I think there are actually advantages and disadvantages both style. So the market array, if a game has a market array where there's a bunch of piles, and say each pile in a lot of these market array games are like 6 or so maybe more, maybe less cards deep. You can choose a couple cards and really specialize your deck. In a market array game, the cards do very different things. In a trade row deck, a lot of the cards, because they appear randomly throughout the course of the game, do basically the same things in different amounts. Like, if you take a look at Clank, there's only 3 or 4 things going on cards. There's the amount of purchase power they generate, the number of swords they generate, whether or not they generate Clank, and in Clank in Space they add like the faction tag, and that's it. It's like the only thing that's on cards. But in Dominion, you have cards that are actions that allow you to pitch cards to draw more cards, or there's cards that provide just a lot of buy power, or extra buy actions, because normally you can only buy 1 card unless you get more buy actions. And then I think it's called Cathedral. It does something weird that no other card does, but it's the card that allows you to deck thin, if I'm not mistaken.
I have at least 11 expansions.
Oh,
there are
okay.
a ton of cards, and that's not even like Dominion's put out more expansions, I bet, than any other deck builder. In fact, they just have one coming out just now.
Oh.
And they got 2 versions of most of them, because first and second editions for most, even their expansions.
Yeah, and they're both, it's really weird too, because the first and second editions both have the same back, and they're both compatible with each other. The only thing is some of the cards that got left behind or they thought were too powerful, they changed slightly. So you did get new versions of some of the older cards. But yeah, they're on the second edition of Dominion, but you can buy, if you have the first edition, you can totally buy the newest expansion and play. And the new expansions are entire games in themselves. They're ridiculous. But they're just throwing that out there, saying that there are a ton of cards that will thin your deck. And I think Dark Ages expansion had the most, or at least I think it had the most. And therefore, not only thinning your deck, but there was also ways to bloat your deck in that expansion too, or bloat other people's decks. I mean, everything under the sun that you can think for mechanically wise for deck builders has probably been done by Dominion. It's like the Simpsons of board games.
But like the fact that the game uses a market allows it to have extremely specialized cards.
Yes, that is correct.
Trade row deck builders will have, generally speaking, by comparison, generalist cards.
And I think if you don't do that in the trade row one, it's gonna really, the game will break down because you can't guarantee that the cards you need will.
Yeah, you won't be able to find the pieces to piece things together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do like them both. I will say that I am more into the trade row games now than the Dominion-style games. The Dominions take a lot of effort with all the expansions we have to be able to make an array of 10 cards that function properly. There's a whole website that does it for you that's really good that will make sure they all work together. But it's super easy to bring out Star Realms and be like, here's your cards, let's go.
Yeah,
there's a certain accessibility issue there. Even if you're just playing like a base game of a market deck builder, like Trains. Trains, when it first came out, was marketed as a Dominion with a board. And it's a market deck builder, so you can pick different cards to be in the market and end up with a slightly different game experience because of this. But like Trains didn't get a lot of expansions, so it's just like the 1 or 2 boxes.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I don't play as much anymore, is because it got to the point, it's like, okay, we played so many of these different variations. Like, every time I pull it out, I want to have at least like 5 different versions of the game that I'm pulling different cards out of, so I have 5 boxes of carry upstairs to bring to the table. It's a bit cumbersome.
I will say, though, the original base game of Dominion is almost like a board game essential. Like, if you're starting out in board games, the original Dominion, just the base game. I mean, if you really, really like it, there's tons of expansions I can recommend. But if you're new to board gaming and you want to try deck building, beyond any of them still, I think Dominion base game is the one you want to start with. I don't know if any of you other guys agree with that, but it's just my opinion. It's easy to teach. It goes through a ton of mechanics. There's a ton of mechanics you can learn really easily with Dominion to get you jump-started on other games.
Yeah, Ascension is very similar in that regard, so it's between Dominion or an Ascension, or even both. But yeah, one of the two should be the starting point. But
so, we haven't let Peter say anything. What does Peter think of deck-building games? Have you played any of them, or which ones have you played?
So I have played Dominion. I've only played it once that I can remember for sure. I remembered enjoying it quite a bit. When I played it, it was just me and 2 others playing. I don't know all the different mechanics that everyone else has been talking about, but I know that it was a game that, to me anyways, I found enjoyable, and I have played a couple other games that have deck building involved. But that was one of the things I was going to ask as somebody who's, again, a little bit more of a newbie when it comes to playing the different types of games or knowing the different types, was in looking up information, just seeing a long list, all the lists that everybody's made of, like, these are deck builder games. And then some people are like, no, that's not really a deck building game. And so I was like, how am I supposed to know which is a deck building game and which is not a deck building game? The two that seemed to be the most, at least in name, was deck building and deck drafting.
So I'll let Dan take this, but I'll just throw this out real quick. The deck building template, or the template original creator, would be that Dominion template. Now, that created the mechanism, and everything else can be attributed to it as long as it follows the core mechanism. And that can be stretched pretty far. But let's go ahead. Dan,
I want to hear what Dan's got to say.
All right. So I've been exposed to a lot of deck building games. I counted 20 on BGG that I played, individual games. In my head, so on BGG, the category is called deck and pool building. So there's these subsection of games where dice, token, or something else for the pool that they're building. Pulling chits or cubes out of a bag I've seen as well, right? So these are still deck builders, but they've skewed the cards for something else, like Quacks. Quacks uses token. Quacks is absolutely one of these games, in my opinion. But there are some games in the BGG database that are flagged as deck building games that are totally not deck building games, in my humble opinion. I found Concordia was flagged as a deck building game. What do you guys think? Do you think Concordia is deck building at all?
Is a deck building. And the reason, so let me defend
I think it is. Wow, okay.
So, in Concordia, it works like several other games where you don't actually have a deck that you technically draw from each turn. You have a hand of cards. In that hand of cards, each card is an action. So, it's a hand management game where you can that's the primary what it is. Not a deck building, but there's a deck building mechanism. So these cards that you play is your cards that you do your actions with. You can purchase, and that's the deck building, but you can purchase cards as with one of the actions, not every turn. You can purchase, not necessarily. You can purchase one of the cards in the market array. So, loosely speaking, it could be considered as having a deck building mechanic, but I don't think it is a deck builder, period. It has a mechanic that is deck builder.
So according to you guys, to be a deck building game, the core mechanism needs to be deck building. But other games can have deck building as one of the mechanics in it. But
Yes.
at that point, you're saying it's not really a deck building game because it is not standalone deck building.
Right, and it's not even it's really
So
hand
there are
management,
games-
action, selection.
Yeah. There are many games that where we can point to and say, hey, this has a deck building mechanism, but it just uses that deck building mechanism for a piece of the whole.
Right.
So in Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game, and I've mentioned this previous on, I think, our hated episode, there is a deck building mechanism because you can spend production to buy military units. Military units are cards that go into a deck. And so when you have to attack and defend, you draw a certain number of cards from this deck, and you have to attack and defend with the cards that you've drawn. Another one is called City of Remnants, which I believe was republished under the title Neon Gods. And you start with a hand of cards, and one of the actions you can take is to recruit, and all the recruits are represented by cards that you add to your deck. And, if you lose a battle and lose a figure from the board because there's a significant area control element, you sort of have to take a character card that's somewhere in your deck and get rid of them permanently. So there's like a one-to-one correspondence between these character cards in your deck and the figures that are moving around the map.
I think that I'm kind of understanding, like, according to you guys, at least us, what's constituting a deck building game versus a game that has some deck building in it, but that's not the core and only mechanic of the game. And so, that's I think that's kind of what I had found through most of my research on the topic of deck building games. And so, with that information, like, I think I found a few games that I've played. So I have played Dominion, and I have played The Quacks of Quedlinburg, and then I have played a little bit Clank, which I'm assuming is a deck building game. But now I'm gonna wait and see what you guys say.
Absolutely.
Well,
Okay, because that
It's
one actually
actually
had
in the
deck
title.
building in the title, so I was like, it better be. But two that kind of surprised me that I've played that were flagged as deck building games, and I thought I would check is, so I played one game of Dice Forge.
Dice Forge is going to be a deck builder in the aspect that it doesn't use necessarily cards, but what you're doing in Dice Forge is every turn you're purchasing dice faces, and you'll place the dice face on your die, your custom die. You get 2 of them.
Right.
And you're building up or making your dice more efficient, or trying to make some sort of engine with it that you're going to roll more frequently with it. It's not necessarily a deck that you're drawing from, but it is you are drafting, not really drafting, sorry. You are purchasing your dice faces and upgrading your dice, and sort of consider that a deck. But I would consider Dice Forge a deck builder.
You would?
Yeah, it's sort of
Okay.
it's sort of an evolution. You kind of have to see the move from deck builders that use cards to deck builders that use dice, like
Right.
Couriers and Dice Masters. And then they went from, instead of building a pool of many dice, we're going to make you build 2 dice, and we're making you switch out the faces.
Right.
I mean, I enjoyed playing that one. Again, I only played it the one time, but I thought it was very interesting. And I find the idea of a deck building game to be fun. I like the idea that you're taking the time to, it's, as in everything, you get decisions put in front of you, and you're like, well, which one of these is the better decision? And usually it depends on, well, what avenue are you trying to take to win the game? Because eventually you're going to have to just kind of choose a path with how you're building your deck, or like in Dice Forge, what type of faces are you purchasing to put on your dice?
Now, and I did like Dice Forge a lot. I would agree it's a deck builder for that. And I also, have you tried the expansion for Dice Forge yet?
No, I just played Dice Forge the one time, so I've not had a chance to play an expansion or anything yet.
You got a little bit before you want to do the expansion on there, because with Dice Forge, they have each of those slots that you could have got the dice faces from.
Mm-hmm.
There's different versions of them.
Okay.
So you can play, and one of them is you can play with more powerful ones or combo-y ones, and so there's a lot of replayability with the base game in general. But eventually, you can get the expansion, which gives you.
Before we too far on, kind of want to comment that it may seem to some people that we're being kind of nitpicky on what we consider a deck builder, but there's a reason for that. It's like deck builder as a concept seems like something that can easily be stretched thin, and it can almost apply to any game if you stretch it thin enough. So it's important to like kind of narrow the concept so it actually has a function, because people look at these mechanics and it's like, oh, I like this mechanic. What other games might I like? If you just open up to every single game, that's not helpful.
See, the thing is, I agree. I think that the template is going to be Dominion that created it.
Yeah.
That's it. I think games can have deck building mechanics in them because they can always have like small mechanics as a small portion. But a true deck building game is going to be only that.
And, you know, I got a lot of deck builders I want to talk about. Then I got, later in the episode, I do have a few games that I consider borderline, things that have mechanisms in them that are related to deck builders, but not necessarily deck builders.
And I will say that the majority of mine have the market array. That seems to be the most popular way to do it.
Okay.
We could probably just get rid of Hero Realms and Star Realms right now. So Hero Realms and Star Realms are virtually the same game like we said before. They have that market array. They have the limited selection of powers and stuff that Dan was talking about. Cool thing though, and I think Star Realms is starting doing it, but Hero Realms introduced a campaign.
Yes.
Cool.
Now, Star Realms is starting to introduce some of those elements that they developed from their later release.
Although, in some of the other ones I'm going to talk about, Hero Realms doesn't let you keep the cards between levels, so it's sort of silly. You can just add like a single level to your main hero, so you get like one extra better card or whatnot. But I thought that was a unique idea in a deck builder to have like a campaign style in there. I think they did it before some of the other ones we're going to talk about. But if you want to get that market array style deck building game, the cheapest way to get a play in of that type of game is probably Hero Realms, because I think it's going to be the cheapest game on any of our lists. Would you agree with that?
Both Hero Realms and Star Realms are like small box games that like retail for like $20.
Yeah, they're very cheap. For the price, worth it. I will say Star Realms has an app that sort of killed Star Realms, the card game, for me. But, you know, that's a different story. Have you played any other deck building games that you know of, Peter?
So the only other ones that, at least that I was able to pull up that I was pretty sure that I've played, one other one was the Arkham Horror, the card game. And on Board Game Geek, it was listed as a deck builder. I, again, only played it the one time, and I don't remember specifically what aspect of it was deck building. So, since I only played it the one time and it's been a while, has anybody else played that one, and would you agree or disagree with that?
I would say Arkham Horror is just as much of a deck builder as Descent is, or Gloomhaven.
Which is exactly what I was thinking.
It's not really a deck builder. They sort of occasionally get cards that can help your hand, sort of thing.
Right, because I don't remember the purchasing of cards to add to your deck, really, like you guys have been saying with everything else, with like the market array or anything like that being in that game. So, and then the only other one that I've been playing, which actually I've just been doing it today because I came up on it, was a solo deck building game called Friday.
Oh no, I've heard about this. This is a good one.
That's the Robinson Crusoe one, right?
The Robinson Crusoe one. It's a solo game. I found it on Tabletop Simulator, and so I watched a couple videos on how to play and pulled it up on Tabletop Simulator just to kind of, again, get the basics of what deck building is. And it's a pretty interesting little game, and I enjoy solo games. It's much easier to get those to the table. So, so I started playing around with it a little bit today and have enjoyed it so far.
Yeah. I definitely want to try.
I feel like those are all the ones that I have played at least once or a little bit, and then I do, after we talk for a little bit more, I do have a list of a couple that I've heard about that sound really good, and I would like to play at some point.
I want to jump back to Arkham Horror. My understanding of that is the deck builder, what they're considering the deck builder, which is, I'm not sure it really is between games. You basically can level up. You can add new cards to your deck, which is similar to Gloomhaven, but like in Gloomhaven, as your character levels up, you get more powerful cards, you swap it out, get rid of the garbage cards. So there's a deck improvement mechanism that's in between games, so I wouldn't really consider that.
Okay, well, I was going to say that would make sense then why I didn't really remember that aspect of the game. I only ever played one game, so I never had the in-between portion to adjust my deck. And like you said, if you're not doing it actually in the game, you're doing in-between games, then that kind of seems a little weird to call it deck building.
Yeah, I think it's too far of a stretch for that to be an actual deck building game.
Okay.
But,
Helps me differentiate.
yeah.
You might be upsetting the people that consider Magic the Gathering.
Magic the Gathering is a CCG, which is completely different.
I would say it's absolutely not a deck builder, but I've heard people claim it is.
Well, the thing that you could do to appease them is the fact that Magic the Gathering is its own genre.
Yes.
It's its own style of game. CCGs are their own animals. Deck building games are different.
As an avid Magic the Gathering fan, and as someone who's played a lot of deck building games, I don't put them in the same wheelhouse at all. Never the twain shall meet.
I mean, if you were talking to someone like me who a week ago, before I really started understanding, or as we're like talking about what deck building is, if you just hear the word deck building, then of course I think you would think Magic the Gathering because you're taking a deck of cards and you're building a deck of cards.
Yeah.
I can understand why but if you're understanding that the mechanic of the deck building is in the game itself.
Right. It's a mechanic instead of a term.
Yeah, then I think you start to understand, oh, okay, now I understand what you mean by deck building. And then, like Dan was saying, if you can say, all right, well, games like Quacks of Quedlinburg are deck building, even though it's little chits rather than cards, because you're building up your bag, and you're pulling from your bag, and you're hopefully making your bag better, so that you're getting better options as you pull from it. Then you start to understand that, again, like you guys were saying, yeah, deck building is the mechanic within the game, not something that you do before the game starts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So another one we should probably knock out real quick, which is going to be up there. We already talked about a little bit. Did you want to give any words about description or what you feel about Clank? Because Clank sort of introduced the board. So a board you actually also play on.
So this happened well before Clank. But this takes a trade road deck builder and adds a, Trains is an example of a market deck builder and adds a board. Clank takes a trade road deck builder and adds a board. And it adds a resource that allows you to interact with the boots. Allows you to move around, right?
Or die.
Or die. Yeah, or definitely die.
So Clank, what that means is you have to, it's a push your luck game in a way. Mm-hmm. Not as much as push your luck is in space. You can die a lot easier in space, or Clank in space. But you're basically racing down the depths to try to pick up a treasure and then make it all the way to the surface, or at least above the line. And the boots help you move down that track or up it.
The addition of the board for both that game and even Trains also just adds another element to the game. There's this spatial relationship now.
And I would say that Clank is still considered a core deck building game because still the main portion of it is the deck building.
I was going to say similar to Thunderstone. Thunderstone was a deck builder. Then they made Thunderstone Effect. Then they made Thunderstone Quest, and they kept adding more and more to it. So you actually have a board, and you have 3 parts to this game where one part where you're getting buying cards, or you're going to places and getting resources, or you're going and fighting monsters. But it started as a deck builder, and they just added to it.
All right, James. We got to talk about the game that I think you referenced in the episode. I think we'll do it now. Were you referring to Eminent Domain?
No, Eminent Domain is 100% a deck building game, even though it uses Puerto Rico style mechanism for leader follower sort of thing. It is a pure deck building game. It has a stagnant array of cards.
But unlike a lot of other deck builder games, there's only 5 or 6 different cards in the game, excluding the technologies that you can acquire, right? Which makes it a different animal. Agree, it's a deck builder, but it's there's something different going on in it than a lot of other deck.
And Dominion, I highly recommend a try. If you ever played Puerto Rico, or even if you've never played Puerto Rico, or Race for the Galaxy has the same sort of idea. They took all that, especially Race for the Galaxy, very complicated to explain because the iconography, and I don't even get into it. Dominion streamlined that, added and highlighted that cool mechanism and made it real. So if you like that sort of idea, I highly recommend it. But no, that is not the one I was going to talk about. I am super surprised you haven't mentioned this because technically it is a deck builder. But I'm going to have to make you think about it. I'm going to make you think about it. And while you're thinking about it, I'm going to talk about another deck builder that I really, really like. And I think that system is is one of the best, and it also takes the deck building, which is typically not cooperative, and turned it into a cooperative experience. And that is the legendary deck building system.
Yeah.
Yep.
The legendary deck building system is amazing. I have the Marvel one. There's Aliens. There's Predator. There's everything. And it takes that deck building and everyone's cooperatively trying to defeat a villain, monster, or survive the aliens. It's really cool how you can take that deck building idea and you're trying to make your deck really efficient so that you get the game. So I like that jump that made. I'm not sure. I know Nathan and Dan both played legendary games of some sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I played a couple titles in their cabinet, but only a couple times each, I think.
And I do think that one, if Peter hasn't played it, I think that is a home run to try to play.
Oh, yes. You have begun to speak my language when you said it's a co-op game. Because co-op games are absolutely my favorite. I love games where everybody is there to beat the game itself. And like I said, I've been enjoying at least some deck building games that I have played, I have enjoyed. And so, yeah, if you're going to give me a deck building game and make it a co-op game, I'm there.
Yeah. I highly recommend that game for you. It is awesome. It could play up to 5 players, at least for the legendary Marvel deck builder. I don't know about the other ones, per se, but that's the one I have. And I heard the Aliens one is the best, but I haven't tried it.
Yeah, I've only played the Marvel one, and it seems like a game I should like. For some reason, I just wasn't thrilled by it, but it looks like a great game. It played really nicely. I don't know why I didn't.
No one's perfect. It's okay.
So, a couple of the things that the legendary game has in it that make it interesting. One is these, the cards have like icons on them, and sometimes, you can play a card that cares about, whether or not you're playing strength cards or what have you. I think one of the really interesting things about it is that the goal of the game is to generate combat strength to beat the boss. And this is completely different than the buy power that you usually use to acquire new cards. So the game's got 2 different resources in it, and these resources are at odds with each other. I think it's one of the linchpins of the game.
I also like it, the fact that you are picking between purchasing cards, buying cards that get you to be able to purchase better cards, or getting combat strength. It has this, I believe, 5-slot card lane that if the henchmen get to the 5th slot, bad things happen. So you have to balance getting those cards versus knocking these henchmen back. It's really good. It's really good.
Like a lot of co-op games, sometimes you have to put a stopper in your progress to put fires out.
Right. And it's the other cool thing is when you defeat some of these henchmen, they do bad things.
They do.
Yes.
That's fantastic. The game's got to fight back. I mean, come on.
Yeah, so you defeat you're like, it's going to be worse if I let them get to the end of the row, but if I don't want to defeat this, I'm going to lose 2 cards. It's like, okay. Like it makes a lot of decisions.
Well, so then as a co-op game, are you also able to exchange with other people?
You can't really trade cards with them, but which cards you purchase. So you may effectively not purchase certain cards to let another person purchase them.
Okay.
That's your interaction. And also, the least thing that'll happen when a henchman makes it to the 5th slot is the highest costing card gets eliminated. So sometimes strategically, it's good to try to refresh that if you had a really bad flop of cards that you have to pick from. But yeah, you're not going to be sharing cards. The strategies is just purely in defeating the villain and which cards you guys are doing. Like if I'm collecting all the Spider-Man cards and you buy a Spider-Man card, I'm going to hate you. No point in having a Spider-Man card. That sort of thing.
Okay.
And I have it, so whenever the quarantine's over, we play.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a relatively short game because I don't remember it taking like much more than an hour to play. Maybe. I don't even think it took an hour.
So then it just has a lot of different scenarios?
Yeah, you pick your... it has a ton of scenarios. And they have so many expansions in it, too. Okay. You pick your boss that you're going to fight against, and they have like a mastermind deck that they're going to play off of. And you have to defeat the boss so many times. I don't remember, but so many times before his master plan.
Yeah. Yeah, there's additional game variability in the scheme, which is sort of like the mastermind's plan, because you can mix and match those two items up as much as you want. And then there's several decks of enemies, and I think you always use 2 of them.
No. Well, it depends. You always use at least 1 to 2 for that boss.
Okay.
And then the scenario, I believe, will determine the rest. So you could have a boss with a different scenario with different scheme cards. It all depends on what you got for expansions and what, if you're just using this game. But yeah, it's good. It's good. It's easy to teach too. So there's only 2 things you really have to, 3 things: faction, combat, and money. And some of them have like simple abilities. So that was legendary, the entire deck building.
No, we mentioned it a bunch of times, but I don't think we actually talked about Ascension.
So Ascension is going to be your like steampunky medieval, I don't know what you call it. It's just basically a fantasy deck building game that runs the market row on there. And effectively it is, I don't know about the rest of you guys, my favorite market row deck building.
I think they did a really good job in the way they built it up. So it started out with a pretty simple, straightforward game where you have 2 different currencies. You got buy power and attack power, and you can build those up. And they keep on doing standalone expansions that each add a rule or 2. And the rule books are really well written, where you can read the entire rule for that, all the rules for that one game, or you could just read the parts that they've changed. So you don't have to read an entire new rule book every single time you buy a new version of this game. That part was really good.
It's really fast playing too. 20 minutes maybe.
So one of the key elements of Ascension, I feel, is the pool of victory points that's in the middle of the table.
Yes.
So it's finite. When it runs out, the game's over. And, primarily you get points out of that pool by using combat strength to defeat monster cards, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, combat strength actually only works for defeating the monster cards or the cultist, and there's a limited number of cultists too. So the cool thing about Ascension is you can't do one strategy all the time. Like you can't go in and be like, I'm going to get a whole bunch of combat. You just might not have that available. You might not get some of the really cool combat cards plop up. So you have to really pay attention to that market row. And the more you play it, the more you know, well, I'm going to get a lot of buy power now, and none of the monster cards are coming up, so I'm going to invest in some combat so that when they do come out and no one else is investing in combat, I can start knocking out these monsters.
You're buying cards you're not necessarily looking at what's on the row right now. You're looking at, this is what's come out so far, so these, combat may be more likely to come out later because there's not been many.
Right. It's a pretty balanced game in what the cards are, so you can roughly guess what's going to happen.
And one of the cool things about the game is that if you start the game speccing for buy power and you hit a point in like the early middle game where there's mostly combat cards on the center row, you can switch gears so you can defeat those things and clear them out of there and turn on the other half of your deck, basically.
I've had a couple games where the whole row was all combat cards. So look out.
Yeah. I mean, it works the other way, too. You could spec for combat, and then you're like, oh, man, there's nothing to fight. I guess I'm just going to fight the stupid mystic thing again.
Or if you play the app on hard, they always do the combat because there's a lot of bonuses you can get for the combat. So the way to break the app is there's cards that let you discard cards from the row, and you beef up on those. They beef up on combat, and you just keep trashing the whole trade route of combat every turn. And you will always beat that app.
Yeah.
Thanks for the strategy tip, James.
It's good strategy tip. It doesn't work with humans, but it does work with that app.
Yeah, this game did have 2 flaws that hurt it a little bit. One of them, the first version of this game, the base Ascension, the art's kind of ugly, but it got much nicer each version, and it's actually gotten very good quality at this point.
I haven't seen the newest stuff, but yeah, the art's terrific.
In the early stuff, yes.
Because I mean, when did this game come out? This game came out in 2010, and it looks like a 1990s art.
Yeah. The other big thing that hurt it was actually the app, because the app is much smoother. It's in some ways better than the base game. It's a free app, so a lot of people actually started playing the app and didn't want to go back to the base game.
And the app actually is different than the game.
Yeah.
Too. Because in the app, there is no limit on cultists. It's unlimited cultists. So you can kill... In the app, if you have extra combat, you can always get 1 point for every 2 combat you have. Where in the real game, that doesn't happen. You run out of cultists. There is no limit in the app.
You can run out of cultists? I don't remember that. Well, okay.
In Ascension, you can run out of cultists because that's what you get. The amount of cards. There's a stack of cultist cards.
Well, there's another deck builder, sort of, that had the same problem with the app as Pathfinder card game. So,
yeah, the adventure card game.
Yes.
That thing was all right. Anyway, so so Pathfinder adventure card game, you basically had semi-standard stacks for the scenario you're running on each of the places, and you'd have your own little deck that you don't get to really replenish at all for the most part, and you're trying to get to the main objective before your deck runs out, because if your deck runs out, you lose. The problem is it took like the Pathfinder system, D&D system, and it converted them into cards. And the issue with that is if you, depending on the class you took, you might not actually be able to complete things, because you'll get into an area and you have to do fighting, and you're like, well, I'm a sorcerer. I can't roll high enough combat, which is very off-putting for the game. The game seemed to only really, when I played it a bit, and they actually have an app for that too, but I played it a bit. I had, before I got rid of them, I had 3 of the box sets, and it just seemed to get worse. The only way the game functioned is that the full player count, and if everyone picked drastically different class types.
Yeah, because each class has its own stats that they're really good at, and if you don't have the right stat for the location you're trying to get into, you're fairly useless. So you really kind of what class you are determines where you can go and be effective.
Right, and unlike Ascension or Star Realms or any of the other deck builders we talked about, you actually roll dice in the Pathfinder game. So you'll be like, okay, I have to beat a guy with 14. Well, I get 2d6. It's going to be 2 6-sided dice. Well, not happening. I can get 12. I'm super lucky.
But as I was kind of getting at it, so there's also one that's kind of not really a board. It is a deck builder, but not really. It doesn't. You're never not cycling your deck, and also when you're getting new cards into your deck, you don't know necessarily. You're not choosing cards. You're exploring and get a chance to add to your deck.
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider actually a deck builder either. I do think that Pathfinder adventure card game, they were onto something. This didn't, I don't think, execute it properly. I think it could have been phenomenal. Pathfinder or D&D card game could have been phenomenal.
I'm sorry, I played some demos of this game when it first came out, and I don't remember. Did you add cards to your deck during the game, or only in between game sessions when leveling up or counting experience or what have you?
So the way it worked is, and I guess the deck building aspect would happen with it, but you have a limited amount of cards when you start the game. That's your deck. That's your pool. Okay, so during the game, you can acquire new cards. You can also permanently lose cards, but you can acquire cards through combat. So it's very hard, necessarily. You're not going to get a net gain. So you're still going to have a big discard pile. You're still going to be whittling down on your health with your cards. And it's going to be less than the cards you're going to bring in all the time. But you could get they have blessed cards, you get new equipment. And at the end of the game, you can pick which cards you're going to keep. And then you're going to set up your deck again for the next game. That was the other problem with the game. It wasn't very intuitive on how to build your deck to fit your character.
Right.
And it was super easy for you to break your deck. And so your next game, because you put in the incorrect combos of your cards in that deck, which sounds like it would be like something you would know not to do, but the cards are so ambiguous that it's hard to tell what's happening until you actually play with them. And you could just totally get tanked in a level and not even really get anywhere because you messed up your deck.
I think we should make it a little clearer how you acquire cards. So basically what's going to happen is you go to these locations. A location will have a mix of equipment, ruins, monsters you can fight, people you can meet and get into your party. And basically, you're going to flip over a card. If you get something like a potentially thing that you can add to your deck, you do a skill check. So you might do a charisma skill check to try to get this guy to join your party, or you might do a strength skill check to open this heavy door to get into a tomb and get some equipment, or you might have to fight a monster.
Well, there's also the blessed cards or whatever that just flip, and you just have to roll a die to see if you. So that's that too. And you're trying to close these areas too, so you're either trying to run out the deck or kill the henchman or the boss. But yeah, it is a good idea. It was an awesome idea.
Yeah, the one thing it had going for it is that I think for equipment cards, when you played them, you didn't really play them. They didn't go to your discard pile. It was just sort of like, oh, I'm going to reveal that I've got this. I'm going to use it. It's going to go back to my hand because it's a piece of equipment. You're not losing your sword.
Yeah. Yeah, in this game, you're losing your sword. You're like, well, I just threw it at him. What do you do? I just throw it at him. Now, there are some mechanisms like shields and stuff can stick around. It takes a lot to explain the game. There's a lot of rules to it. If you're going to play it, I highly recommend playing the app first before you go purchase it, because the app will let you play the first at least couple scenarios free. So make sure you like it through the app, which is free, to play the first couple scenarios and stuff. I believe it's available on iOS. I know it's available on iOS. I think it's available on there.
Yes, it's available on it.
All right, what else do we absolutely have to mention?
So deck builders that try to innovate a little bit, like Harry Potter, Hogwarts Battle. I don't know if you guys played that one, but in that game, which is a deck builder, you are actually progressing through a campaign. So you're going through all 7 books of the Harry Potter, whatever it is, where you have 7 books. And what's really cool with it is you're improving your character and your deck throughout the entire game. And you're basically fighting more and more bad guys as you go along. I thought that was a really cool idea. I know a couple came after that built it. It's also a very inexpensive game made by WizKids. Let's see if that's right. Oh, no, it's made by the Op. So it's an inexpensive game made by the Op. I thought it was a lot of fun. It really got that legacy feel in, because every time you progressed, you would open a new cardboard box, which was a new chapter. So you got that legacy feel of pulling all this stuff out, seeing all these new bad guys that would pop up and all these new cards that would be available for you to purchase. It was really, really cool. I know now we actually have real legacy deck builders, but I think that was the first one that was legacy-ish deck builder.
Well, that's one that I've heard about and have been interested in playing, just because, again, I'm a librarian. I like Harry Potter.
It's if you're a librarian, you have to like.
You just have to love Harry Potter. No, I've enjoyed the Harry Potter books, enjoyed the Harry Potter movies, and so having a game that would let you play as one of the characters through the series, I think would be a lot of fun. And seeing that it's a co-op game, again, I'm sold on co-op. And so how does the deck building mechanism work in that game? What's the...
So it's going to be similar to the other ones we talked about. Like, you would know, like Clank sort of idea, where you have your market row of cards you can pick. And you have, I believe, you always have like 10 cards you start with, you draw them, and you can purchase stuff. Your market row becomes better and better as you go along. But then in this game, you also not only have a board where you're defeating the bad guys on, or the objective, you also have a character with a special power that you can fire off. It's cool too. And the other thing, like the Harry Potter books, when you're at book 1, you really can't do much of anything. You start winning with luck.
Okay.
And then you start, well, you don't really win with luck. You still use strategy, but you're not very powerful. And then each year you get older, you get more tricks. So it's cool in that way too.
Yeah, so you're growing in your wizardry as you
Right.
play. Okay. I mean, it sounds like a fun scenario anyways, so.
Yeah, and that's another one I can play with you too after the quarantine's over. Just reset it and we can go.
Does it have good replayability?
Yeah, the replayability is fine. I know it happened.
Okay.
So, does it have spoilers for the books?
If you haven't read the books, don't play the game. Or watch the movies. If you watch the movies, I guess it's about the same idea.
Right. No, that sounds good. I like and sometimes enjoy when you take a good IP and drop it into a game. I know not everybody enjoys that, and sometimes it feels really, really gimmicky and kind of maybe takes people out of the game. But that sounds like it would be a good time. So
I think they did a good job with it. And I do like IP-based games. There's most of them. But this was good.
Okay.
Well, that's one thing that's been changing over the years. Is traditionally IP games have been terrible, but there's been more and more decent ones and good ones that have been coming out.
Yeah, I think it's looking up as well.
For this other hint out there, the game that I think you're forgetting about is one of the ones that was considered an innovative deck builder.
Innovative.
Innovative. So innovative deck builder where you don't necessarily have to change the cards you have. So you're not necessarily getting new cards.
Not getting new cards.
But you're improving the cards you have.
I mean, Mystic Veil.
Yes.
Mystic Veil. All right, yeah. In Mystic Veil, you start with a deck of 20 cards, and it never gets bigger. But it uses this cute mechanism where there are Veil improvements, and each card is divided into a top, middle, and bottom. So a starter card might have just a middle, and the other two sections are blank. And most of the starter cards are completely blank. And the deck building mechanism is to make those blank cards slightly less blank before the end of the game, and hopefully earn some victory points along the way, right?
And I like the push your luck element in it too.
Yeah. So the game has a push your luck element where you set up, and there are these spoil symbols on cards. So you have this flop of cards, and you get all the symbols on all these cards, except that you have this opportunity to add one more card if you need to. And if you do, the top card of your deck is revealed, and if at any point in time you have, I think it's 4 or more of these spoil symbols, you bust, and you get nothing on your turn. Nothing.
That's not the game that I thought you were alluding to, but we'll get to that later.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's the part I like about it the best, because you get to watch other people's faces like, no!
I mean, most of the time, if I'm going bust, I'm doing it intentionally because the hand that I've got is garbage.
Yeah.
Or I want the one free mana that you get for busting, so I have one additional buy power for my next.
Like, oh no!
But I also have one that I thought Dan might talk about, but I had to look this up when I saw that BGG listed as a deck builder, because I was like, couldn't remember how that was working as a deck builder. But that's Grifters. BGG considers Grifters a
Oh, yeah. You know what? I saw this on my list of played games in the deck building category. And so there's 4 games that I have on my list that are like deck building, ? Right? Because they are flagged as deck builders on Board Game Geek, but they do not feel like deck builders. And that's Concordia, Grifters, which is also a hand management game. There's no deck. All the cards that you have access to are always in your hand or on your personal player board, right? The others, for reference, are Century Spice Road. Same difference. Mm-hmm. All the cards are in your hand until you pick them up. And then Lewis and Clark is another. It's definitely got an engine building element, but again, all the cards are in your hand. So you have a full selection of what you want to do with that hand at the start of the turn. And, you have to puzzle out how you piece that together, but
I think Century Spice Road would be close. The Century Spice Road, it's definitely hand management, but you're definitely only purchasing cards to put in your hand. I don't know.
Well, hand management, while it's essentially mechanically very similar to deck building, the only real difference is the information and the lack of the luck. And that actually makes it feel very different. It's because you know everything you have, and you have everything available to you, rather than having to draw to hope you get the card there's one card that you know is in there.
Right. And as someone who in their gaming career has dealt with a lot of hands, like I've drawn many, many Magic hands throughout my career, and been asking myself, how do I piece this into a decent 2 to 3 turns? That element exists in Concordia, Grifters, etc. It doesn't exist in like Hero Realms, Star Realms, and a lot of deck builders that say, oh, by the way, you're going to play all your cards every single turn, and if you don't play your cards for their effect, they're going to be discarded at the end of the turn anyway.
So, I have a very left field example. A Martin Wallace game. It's A Study in Emerald. Have you heard of this one?
I've heard of this one. I've never had a chance to try it out.
So, A Study in Emerald is super left field. It's based on a Neil Gaiman book. So, it's Lovecraft Cthulhu themed. Well, basically, the old ones have already taken over, and you may or may not be supporting the old ones. So it has a hidden role. It's largely a hidden role game with some very minor deck building ups to it. So what happens is, at the very beginning game, you get your roll. They're randomly distributed, so you don't even know how many traders there could be, or if there even are any traders. And technically, the traders are the ones trying to defeat the old ones. So you're going to have a hand of cards that give you actions, like allow you to move around the board, allow you to attack the old ones, or acquire, or gain influence. But at the different locations, each location has a deck of cards, which you can see the top deck card of each deck. And those are cards you can acquire. But first, you have to gain influence at that location. And if you have the most influence in that location, then you are able to try to buy these cards to add them to your deck. But one of the other unique thing is that because it's, hit and roll, you have the two factions, and you have, as you acquire cards, you're scoring points for both factions. But at the end of the game, you reveal your faction, and only the cards that were your faction subtracting points for all the cards that technically didn't count. So you're bluffing by raising your score really high with cards that actually aren't worth anything for you. It gets even weirder when you have 4 or 5 players, because it ends up being a team game where you don't know who's on your team. And your final points are actually reduced if somebody on your team is really low in score. So you actually want to help bring up the lowest point scoring person if you think they're on your team.
Yeah, that's definitely an oddball example. I will grant you that.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and we're going to the point of what do you guys think is the best deck building period? So you already know mine. I think it's a Dominion or Ascension. So Peter, what do you think is the best deck building period?
Yeah, I've only played a few, and so of the ones that I've played, I would probably lean towards the one that I've played the most, so it kind of feels a little skewed there, but I would probably go with the Quacks of Quedlinburg, because so far I have played it 3 times, and every single time that I've played it, I have found it to be fun and enjoyable. I love the pacing of that game. It is not long and drawn out. I love the fact that everybody's getting to play at the same time, filling up their little stew of potion. But I find the replayability of it to be really high, because you have all the different books. Things are going to get pulled out, and it's going to get a little bit different each time you play that. And then again, like you guys have said, if you get further along, you start mixing the books to see what might work well together. I have enjoyed that one quite a bit, and knowing that that's kind of what you're looking for in a deck building game, I'm very much looking forward to being introduced to other deck building games. Like I said, I've got a list of some ones that I've heard of that I'm just like, okay, these are going on my list of 2 plays, hopefully as soon as possible.
Yeah, Quacks would definitely be up there, but I think that's probably my favorite deck builder. But if you want to go for more of the traditional, strict, this is a deck builder, Ascension, it's a great game. They're also fairly inexpensive. It's like $30 or less to get a copy of Ascension.
Yeah, Ascension's pretty cheap, and Ascension plays really quickly.
Yeah.
Not like Hero Realms or Star Realms play, but it does play really. So Dan, you ready with one?
Yeah, I'm done debating. It is a very tough choice, because there are a lot of really good games in this category for me personally. Like, I like Quacks a lot. I'm liking Orleans so far. It's a relatively new acquired for me, though. So I'm going to go with the game that's been in my collection the longest and has given me the most enjoyment, and that's Clank in Space.
I will say Clank in Space is definitely my favorite of the... I like Clank in Space a lot more than I like Clank, and I like both of them a lot. So for you, what makes you like Clank in Space so much, especially over regular Clank?
Well, I haven't played regular Clank as many times as Clank in Space, but Clank in Space, for me, is a quintessential deck builder. You can build an engine. That engine can do one of 2 things. You can either generate tons of movement, the boot deck, or you can generate combat strength and beat up on the goblin a lot for like free victory points in that game. Or you could do like something that's in between those 2 extremes, more likely than not. And then you can switch them up in the middle of your play based on what other people are doing, which is super important because the game's a race and people will die if you're not careful.
I will say that the reason I like Clank in Space a lot more than regular Clank is that it is a lot easier to die in Clank in Space. It's a lot easier. And it's also, I think it's a lot tighter game. Those assassin cubes are insanely bad, too. Also, when they start getting in there, you're like, oh no. Because they'll kill you. They give a damage to everyone that's around, no matter what. Instead of, like, normally when the dragon or space lord attacks, it only gets that exact player.
Yeah. Once they are in the mix, or in the bag, there's a negative deck building mechanism with the Clank bag, right? So you want to generate as little Clank as possible in order to not take tons of damage. Generally speaking, there's definitely a strategy where you go high clank, and it's a very risky one to pursue, but it sometimes can pay off. So
I also like that, like, it's sort of like you have to, unlike Clank where you just race down, in Clank and Space you have to get security keys in 2 places. Is that right? 2 places?
Yeah, in 2 places.
And once someone takes a treasure, that one door locks down, which is like the express route out. No. When it gets to a certain point on the
boss track. He shuts down the conveyor belt so you can't make it all the way back to the cargo pod as easily.
Yeah, there's a lot more tension, a lot more stuff in that space.
Yep.
So it sounds like everybody here enjoys the deck building game genre. And I don't want to feel left out as being the only one who's not played games. So my question is what's the game in this genre that you know about that you want to play?
Like in the future?
Yeah, because again, I've got a list of games that you guys have talked about tonight that I'd like to play, plus ones that I've already looked up. But what are the deck building games that you all have not yet played that you're like, if I could play this next deck building game, this would be the next one I play? I'll jump out there first. Probably the one that I've heard about that I would probably be like, yeah, I want to do this one absolutely next. Probably would be one that I saw at Origins, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't take the chance to play it, and that is Dragonfire, which is supposedly a co-op deck building game set in D&D world by Wizards of the Coast. And so that is one that's high up on my list because it ticks the box of it being a co-op. It ticks the box that it's got a little bit of D&D thrown in there. And so that's just, I've heard good things about it, and I'd like to give it a shot.
Yeah, that game's got, you could upgrade your character, too, over time.
Okay, so it's got a little bit of a legacy kind of campaign or whatever?
Yeah, I know it's loosely based on the Shadowrun game. Just, stickers on player boards to give them, unique special powers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's definitely based, actually is Shadowrun. So it's a re-theming D&D. They added a couple extra stuff in it, but it is Shadowrun. So
interesting. Okay.
The whole thing is on there. And the other cool thing about it is that it plays up to 6 players, too.
Oh, that's a lot.
So you can get a lot of people to the table if you want. I do believe you probably want to keep it lower because you want to keep the same play group in general with it, I guess, because there's different adventures you go through in it.
Yeah, if there's the chance of a campaign, you want to, probably 3 or 4 people. It's easier to get the same 3 or 4 people back again and again.
Yeah.
6 would be kind of tough, like you said.
But yeah, that's definitely a strong game to pick. I'm trying to figure out how the game I want to play here is actually a deck building game, but I'm going to go ahead and let Nathan go while I try to figure out how I'm going to spin this as a deck building.
Well, I have one that's listed as a deck building game. I'm dubious whether it really is. It's Food Chain Magnet. Is it a deck builder?
Food Chain Magnet is not a deck builder.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider it a deck. Well, I don't know what they're talking about. No.
Okay.
Although Food Chain Magnet, I would love to play with you guys. I don't know how you could possibly think that's a deck builder. No. I mean, not you specifically.
No, I just go with my BGG. I didn't think it was, but okay. Rococo then will be my deck builder that I want to play, which is a fashion-themed deck builder where you're actually trying to build nice dresses and get them onto dilettantes.
What's it called again?
Rococo.
Rococo, okay.
It's a very hard-to-get game, although is it going back in print? Sure.
Well, Rococo, no, I don't know.
No, they're still selling it for $250 on Amazon, so I don't think it's back in print.
Not my pick, but I would definitely play it if you bought it, but not for $300.
No.
So while Dan's thinking there, mine's going to be Tyrants of the Underdark, which is a D&D themed game.
Mm-hmm.
Which I believe the character Drizzt. Does that sound right?
Yeah, Drizzt.
With the dark elves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically lead a house of Drow in the section of Underdark below Sword Coast. And you have a Drow house that you're trying to get to the top and win with. I don't know exactly how it pans out in the end, but it looks really interesting. I like the theming on it. It has good ratings, has really good ratings. And it is a deck building game where you're going to basically purchase your cards to add into your deck to keep you moving. And it has a board on it. It just looks really cool. I don't know if any of you guys been able to play Tyrants of the Underdark?
Nope.
Wait a second. Let me look this one up. I think I might have had it at the store at one point in time.
Yeah, I think you did. I kept debating getting it, and I bought different games there instead. And I should have picked up that one also. It's been around since 2016.
Okay, yeah, no. I remember this coming into the store. Yeah, there's definitely some card play involved. I think it's at its core, though, it's an area control game of some kind.
It's an area majority game in there.
Yeah.
So you do have the deck building component in there, but you're basically just doing the main thing is area majority in order to put your house ahead in the game. And what was cool about this is that Wizards of the Coast came out with Lords of Waterdeep before it, and this was sort of the next game. So they had Lords of Waterdeep, they had the Lords of Waterdeep Scoundrels of Skullport expansion. I was hoping for more Lords of Waterdeep stuff to come out, and they came out with Tyrants of the Underdark instead.
Okay.
And I really want to get that one to the table and play it. I'm hoping it's better than the other game where you're playing as giants. What was that game?
Giants?
No, you were the giants.
I think the name of the game was called Against the Giants. It was based on the campaign of the same name.
No. This is Assault of the Giants, maybe? Is that it?
Yes, Assault of the Giants.
Assault of the Giants. So, yeah, that was the one I got instead of Tyrants of the Underdark. No, I didn't get that one. Nathan gave me that game.
Yeah.
And I really tried to love that game. It has asymmetric giants in there where you're just basically trying to control your different objectives and win the game. But the problem was they weren't really balanced very well.
Terribly.
I know people say, like, oh, well, this faction is better than this faction, and they're not necessarily right. But it really seemed like in that game, you would be right. It just didn't work. It seemed to want to build off of, like, a cosmic encounter sort of idea where you have, like, one super powerful guy potentially and a whole bunch of weak people, and you have to gang up on that super powerful guy. It was just, I don't know. It didn't work at all.
Well, they also tried to add an element of each faction had a story, and you're going along the story of that faction. But that just basically ended up meaning you pigeonholed this faction, and you have to go along this one route.
Yes. I don't know what it was so... It's like it wasn't fully developed.
Okay.
I mean, it probably was. It didn't seem like a complete thought.
Huh. Assault of the Giants is at 3,400 something with a geek rating of 5.8.
Yeah. Tyrants of the Underdark is a 190. It's a really good game. Assault of the Giants deserves its super low rank.
So Tyrants of the Underdark for James, Rococo for Nathan.
He likes dresses.
That's okay. Yeah. And Dan?
As long as
see, it's good that this is a podcast because you don't get to see what he's wearing. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you see hear the sequence?
So there is a game that's flagged as deck building on Board Game Geek that's on my pile, as it were. The game is called Baseball Highlights 2045. I have downloaded this game's rulebook, and I found it as a mod on Tabletop Simulator. And I haven't opened up the rulebook to see what the game is about yet, but I am looking forward to at least checking this one out.
Baseball Highlights 2045, one of the podcasts I listen to other than ours, which don't listen to any other than ours. They tout it as a really good game. It looks really cool. I know a lot of people like baseball. I'm not one.
Well, so, I'm not interested for the baseball theme, which is why I'm trying it out on Tabletop. Like, this is probably going to be a game that I'm going to check out, realize that it's pretty cool, and probably not end up buying. But I'm going to give it the chance to change my mind.
Well, I think the baseball theme is fairly loose. I mean, I'm just looking at some of these cards. Like this one card, this ability. Spitball. Cancel all hits versus a cyborg.
So the idea of Baseball Highlights 2045 is cyborgs are replacing the real baseball players. So you're trying to take your baseball team and through 21st century baseball game, you're trying to win the playoffs or whatever. So I think mechanically it looks really cool.
You go through these mini games, and each mini game represents one of the 4 games in the World Series, and you do have a fixed deck. So you're not deck building in between the 4 games, but a game of this is 4 games. So there's like deck building in between rounds then, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, and you can have, there's humans mixed with cyborgs. It looks cool.
This is definitely one I'd play. I'm always up for trying something new, a new theme. I don't think I've ever actually played a sports board game.
I've played a couple sports games, but we're not going to talk about them.
Because they're not deck builders. Yeah.
No, well, they're also awful. But I'm sure there's a ton. I actually really, really, really want to play a Blood Bowl.
Oh, yep.
Okay.
And there's also a Blood Bowl deck building. I want to try that.
Well, as always, I walk away from this with a lot more games that I want to play than I probably ever will get the chance, but that's the goal, right? You just keep trying to play as many as you can.
Well, when this quarantine's over, we could probably do, like, game nights and stuff. But definitely get you caught.
Sounds good.
Oh, so you're probably referring to Blood Bowl Team Manager, the card game.
Yeah, Blood Bowl Team Manager, the card game. That looks cool. I would love to play Blood Bowl too, but I need to find someone else that wants to waste their time painting miniatures.
I do have one other obscure deck builder I want to try at some. Hand of Fate Ordeals.
I believe that was a video game, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a video game. It was a board game made as a video game that was eventually made as a board game.
That's not confusing in any way.
Yeah, okay. It was a video game that was designed as if it were a tabletop game that they more brought into the physical space, I think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, an app. It was a nice app, though. I did enjoy the app a lot and played it for a while. So that's kind of why I was interested in it. It was a Kickstarter. I almost backed it, but you don't know. With a company that's, like, not coming from the board game industry that's been doing just apps so far, it's got not terrible reviews, but I still don't know. The artist was Ian O'Toole.
Is there any games you guys want to highlight that you played recently at all?
For me, I am currently playing The Crew. I just got my copy in last week, and my wife and I have started playing with the 2-player variant on the rules. So we're enjoying it quite a bit so far. We played the first 7 missions out of 50, and the first 6 missions we had no problem with. The 7th mission definitely gave us a bit of an issue. I think we ended up having to play it 3 times before we were able to complete it. But we were liking it quite a bit and looking forward to continuing to play that one. And then I'm really looking forward to, once the quarantine is over, to get at least 3rd person in there to see how that plays. Because the 2-player variant, I can see how it definitely makes it easier, especially at the start. But I'm looking forward to getting a few more people at the table to play that with. But it's a good game. I like it.
For me, I got to play Keeper, which Keeper is a unique worker placement game with you have color-coded workers, and if you place your worker on the board that matches the border or the color of the action you're trying to do, you get to double up your action. And the cool mechanism is other people can follow you. So in turn order, if they want, up to 1 person can join you, and you get to do the action 3 times. And it's a really cool sort of mechanism with that. And it's a neat how you're building up this board that is your village. It was just really boring. And it don't matter how many times you play it. It just, I like the idea a lot. I love worker placement. I love how it introduced a cool mechanism I've never seen before. That joining mechanism is really cool. And I like how you try to build up your resources to match the different tiles that you build on the board, and you can show off at fairs and stuff. The overall game just fell flat. So I was super excited to play it, and then it disappointed.
Yeah, I played a pretty bad one.
Yeah. I don't know. I know Dan's played it. So
I know, because somehow my copy ended up in your hands, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it did. And mine will be going forward to someone else.
And I have one to give to you that I just played.
What's that one?
So this it got some pretty good reviews. It's Space Alert.
Space
Oh,
Alert.
yeah. Okay.
So
I've heard of this.
Space Alert is timed game, so red flags it for me there. Cooperative time game where communication is important. In this game, you actually have a soundtrack that you're listening to. The soundtrack's giving you a instruction as far as what the enemies are going to be doing, and meanwhile you're planning the entire game actually for your person on the board, and you have to place all those cards face down so nobody else can see them. You're allowed to talk and tell people what you're doing, but there's so many things. It's basically program movement. There's so many things that can mess with your program, and if you're focusing too much on your program, you miss some instruction on the soundtrack, you've completely ruined the game. You have a threat that should be on the board that's not there, or put down the wrong threat. It's just frustrating. There's too much to pay attention to. There's too much to do. My gaming group wasn't talking a whole lot, so that wasn't great. And also the fact that we played 6 games of this, and we were still in the tutorial.
Yeah, so Dan, have you played anything new?
I've been using online platforms to check out titles that I am interested in acquiring, and I have to say that one of the winners so far is the game Glenmore 2 Chronicles. This is a tile-laying game set in Scotland. It's got this really interesting... So at the beginning of the game, there's 4 piles of tiles, and whenever a pile of tiles runs out, you do this intermediate scoring round. But like all the scoring is you compare yourself across 4 different categories with whoever has the least of that thing. So the scoring is really tight because your difference between yourself and the least might be only a few items. I mean, it can be a lot of items, but I think the most points you can earn is like 8 or so for like 5 or more items than whoever has the least. You know, the tiles are beautiful, and it's got this cool market board where, you know, if you're short a resource, you can pay coins for it, but that allows somebody else to sell a resource to the market to get those coins, which then they can use for other purposes. I'm really liking it, and I've only played the core game. The game comes with 7 chronicles that are like micro expansions that add additional stuff to the core game. And I don't know how any of those work because I haven't taken a look at the chronicle rule book. Yeah, this is pretty good.
Yeah, that Glenmore 2 looks really good. It has 3 things I like. Well, first it's like it has that mechanism that's similar to Yellow Yangtze and Tigris and Euphrates, where the least wins. It's about whiskey, so that's a win.
Okay, so whiskey barrels is one of the scoring things. Yes.
The only scoring thing. Okay. Oh, and it looks like it comes with metal coin, the real game.
Yeah, I don't know what comes in the real game. Be aware that the game did launch on Kickstarter, so there may be multiple versions.
So that's probably where that... So it looks relatively expensive, too. It's an $80 game. I don't know. That looks cool. It's cool. Hey, I just wanted to take a second to talk about some changes that we're going to make. These are all positive changes. We do this for fun, and we are going to doing it indefinitely no matter what. But a couple things that we wanted to talk about was that we are updating the website. We're going to have a new articles tab, so you can see different tabletop gaming articles on there. We are also going to be trying to put up more YouTube content, so hopefully in the next months to come you'll be seeing more of that. We're going to be changing the format of the podcast. We're not entirely sure what that's going to be yet. We're working through some kinks. So give some time. We also have a couple of podcasts still being edited, so that will be, you won't see a dramatic change quite yet, but later on you will. If you have any suggestions for what you would like to see in the podcast, please send that to podcast@tabletopgamingguild.com. Also, we are looking to help cover the costs of the hosting and the podcast feed and want to get better mics so we can increase our audio quality and make it a lot better. Trying to work at that intermittently through software, but it'd be nice to have actually good equipment. In that effect, you can greatly help out if you like our content to subscribe to both our YouTube channel and to the podcast itself. That helps out a lot. So we're also trying to do Amazon affiliate links. So if you like the product we're talking about, they'll be in the links below. Just know that we get a small commission off of that. It's going to go to, again, paying for hosting, and it's going to go towards hopefully getting new mics and just basically equipment for the channel. And purchasing anything that's greatly appreciated. It won't affect the cost of the product you're buying on Amazon, but it does help us out. So that's greatly appreciated if you can do that. Also, if you just want to throw us a couple bucks, you can go to the tabletopgamingguild.com and click donate and just give us a buck or two. All that helps. If you would like to give reoccurring support, you could go to the Tabletop Gaming Guild website and go to the support tab, and on the support tab, that'll take you to Patreon, and you can become a Patreon supporter. There's added bonuses to that. You will be able to join our Slack channel, which is for members only, and on there you can help us determine what we're going to be talking about. You can join in discussions about the podcast with the host, us, directly. So there's a lot of benefits to that too, and we're also using that to help gain funds to be doing like board game giveaways and other fun stuff that we do with our listeners. So that's also greatly appreciated. Finally, just to remind you guys that we have a open Discord channel. So the link will be down below for that. You can join that, and that's just a community-centered discussion for anything tabletop gaming related. So please feel free to enjoy that. Also, you can join our Instagram and Facebook feed. If you join our Facebook channel, we also have a Tabletop Gaming Guild group. If you message me directly, I will add you to the Tabletop Gaming Guild group, which is a lot of fun there. It's a little bit more private. But again, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed all the content, and you guys have a good day.
Thank you for listening. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Board Game Geek Guild 2989, or our website at tabletopgamingguild.com. And don't forget to like, follow, and or subscribe. Tabletop Gaming Guild is a product of Tabletop Gaming Guild, LLC. All rights reserved.